did before. Previously in Korean history, Korean women had some freedom. They had some name, and they had property. They could own property, inherit property from their parents. But in Joseon, very strictly since the 1600s anyway, since the late 1600s, women had no human rights, no education, almost no name. Even really, they were just virtually the slave of their father, and then the slave of their husband. And if their husband died, even then their oldest son would be the boss of the family. And women had no rights at all. And again, that's bad for society. It's bad for social development if women are not allowed to use their talents. The woman you have in your pocket there on the 50,000 won bill, Shim Sa-endang was one of the very few educated common women of society at that time. She was a great artist, and she could read and write Chinese characters. That's why she's on the 50,000 won bill. Very exceptional. Lack of literacy. Until King Sejong invented the Hangul alphabet, only 5% of the population could read and write. And right up through the end of the Joseon dynasty, Hangul was not used that much. Not much until like about the 1870s, 1880s. Not even used, not very widespread. Some people made use of it, not that much. And most of the population could not read and write. There was no education system for 90% of Koreans. And that, again, is bad for society. All of this makes development. There's something called Shilhak, and you can look this up yourself, and such, a movement of Neo-Confucians who made progress in science, and political science, and sociology, and philosophy. Guys made great advancements, including the big superstar Dasan Jongyak-yong, who built the Suwon Castle in 1800. This showed a great progress of engineering and science right here in Suwon. But it didn't change society much. It didn't do anything to make real progress. You had slavery. Not the kind of racist slavery like we think of in America with white people owning black people, but there was slavery among Koreans. It went in an endless cycle, really. You had farmers who had their freedom. They had their own land, piece of land, and they're working, but then they have to pay tax. They have to pay tax to the lord, the local lord, and the local lord paying tax to the king. During the dynasty, taxes kept going up. The king would have some reason, he kept needing to raise taxes. The nobles wanted more money. They would raise taxes, and the farmers then would go bankrupt. Everything they farmed, they had to pay in tax. They barely had food enough for themselves, and then they had to borrow money from the landlord in order to get seeds for next year's farming and such, and then they're in debt. And then they can't pay the debt, and it ends up they become slaves to the landlord. They just give up and say, okay, this land, it's your land, and I'm your slave. My whole family is your slave. Go ahead, because we cannot pay those debts. It's very much the same thing in modern society, what happens with credit cards and banks and people. You get yourself in enough trouble, you become a slave for the next 20 years just paying the bank with very high interest rates, and you're lucky if you're not paying gangsters for that, yeah. This sort of thing. Then they would get liberated, because slaves are actually very expensive. Slaves are not economic, as the Romans discovered, as the white American people discovered also. In the 1800s, slaves are not economic. You got to pay for their food, their health care. You got to supply their tools and their clothing. And as slaves keep having babies, these expenses mount, and slaves are lazy. If you're a slave, you don't want to work hard, because why should you? It's all the same. You get the same dinner tonight, the same clothing, the same benefits if you don't work. So they'd find many, many excuses not to work. Slaves are lazy. And so it would always get to the point where the lord, the landlord, the person would liberate the slave. Say, okay, you're free, you're free, you're free. That's your land, that's your land, that's your land. Make them free and make them pay taxes to him. And then they would work hard because they're free and it's their land. Then they start working hard and such, but then they pay taxes, but then the taxes go up. And every 100 years, 200 years, the same cycle repeats itself. So that kind of slavery, and you see certain slaves at the beginning of this, they get This was the thing where people born in that system at the lowest classes, the slaves, kind of hopeless. Lower classes, no chance of advancement, even for those who are talented and worthy. Now, something happens here. America attacked Japan. No, not even America, but one American ship, a merchant ship with cannons, kind of acting on its own, not the US government. The government demanding that Japan simply open for trade. They wanted to trade with Japan, but Japan had a closed policy. No trade with anybody, no foreigners. Okay? America attacked. And in response to this, they opened up. 1853, the Japanese said, oh, Americans attacked it. They had much better ships, bigger ships, much better ships, and those cannons, really excellent cannons. The Japanese went, whoa, and their reaction was to say, we want to do that. The Americans, and they already knew about the British, and of course the Portuguese and the Spanish previously and such. They had a period of 14 years of opening Japan, modernizing it, reforming it, and then restoring the emperor's power. Remember, the emperor in Japan, even though just symbolic emperor and annoying China with this word, but the emperor had no power in Japan for 1,000 years. No power. Japan was run by great families, noble families, and military dictators like Hideyoshi. But now they put the emperor actually in power. This new young emperor, he was just 15 years old when he started. He was young and he was bright, he was smart, had ambitions, had ability. They recognized it. They put him in power, actually gave him the power of emperor for the first time in 1,000 years. And he's known as Meiji the Great and the Meiji Eras, 1867 to 1912. So everything that happens in the Mr. Sunshine drama, that happened during the Meiji era. The thing was, they opened first in Asia. They were the first country in Asia to respond this way of saying, oh, those Westerners, those white people coming in with big ships, let's be like them. Let's do what they're doing. Other countries, no. Other countries all up and down East Asia, people said, oh, just go away, keep them away, and we will keep our own culture the way it is. This goes back to Joseon's stagnant society. Starting by 1860, Japan was bugging Korea to open up, like Japan was doing. He's like, hey, come on, do what we're doing. Open yourself up, modernize. We have these new things called factories that the British have developed. Factories, we're building factories, and we can pump out new products like guns, and we want to trade with you, and we want you to open up and modernize, do like what we're doing. And Koreans said no. The top leading Koreans said, no, we keep our own culture. We keep our own society. We don't want to trade with you. We don't want to trade with anybody. We're not scared of the Westerners. We're just going to keep the Westerners.